Hi everyone. I hope you were able to go through the previous unit completely. I understand that it was a very long, very monstrous unit, but it's one of the most important units. Now, today we're going to talk about metrics. Metrics, throughout my journey, I've heard too much about metrics, people asking me questions, me struggling with metrics, and so on. And I hope that this unit is going to demystify a lot of the concepts about metrics. What is a good metric? What is a bad metric? How do you identify them? How do you measure them? And so on. So let's move on. So we'll be covering metrics, the good, the bad, and the ugly, how to measure them, what to measure them, and where to go from there. Okay. So first of all, understand that metrics is not an afterthought. Metrics need to be thought and baked in right from the beginning of the code, beginning of the product itself. A pragmatic product leader is constantly measuring. He doesn't do anything which cannot be measured or has some means of measuring the impact. Okay. Think of it like this. There are 52 weeks in the entire year. With an average sprint cycle of 2 weeks, we're talking about 26 releases. So essentially 26 impact points in the entire year. So unless and until you have a measuring mind, you are constantly thinking about whatever you're doing, how it does it impact the bottom line, the top line, or whatever business goal that you're attacking. How would you improve? How do you build the right thing? Right? So a pragmatic product leader is constantly measuring, always has major numbers in mind and the numbers that he cares about. Which numbers are these? These are the metrics that determine the success or failure of products and they have been carefully selected. To give an example, you know the formula of momentum, right? M equal to MV. In the business world, I called small m as metrics and V as velocity in the direction of your goal. So let me illustrate with an example. So your goal is to improve retention by 10%. So metric is retention. Velocity is speed over time. So let's determine velocity towards the goal. Let's say you want to hit the target in 1 month. That is, you want to improve the retention by 10% in 1 month. Typically, without time duration, the metrics are kind of meaningless. Then your velocity is 10% over 1 month or 2.5% per week. That's your goal. Or translated into a sprint cycle or per release cycle. Effectively, per release cycle, we should be aiming at building something which can improve the retention by 5% per sprint, right? Which is of 2 weeks approximately. So then 5% and 5% on top of that would result in 1 month. I'm oversimplifying it, but you get the drift, right? And if you realize that's the momentum you wish to hit, 2.5% retention is the metric, and per week is the 1 unit of retention per week velocity. That's how important metrics are. They are the only way to quantify your theories, your efforts, and I'm sure you have been doing this since ever. Or maybe not, but you will start doing it now. So metrics need to be tailored to the audience that you're presenting them. Okay. Metrics get you deal end of the day. Okay. Everything else uh, will get you attention, will get you respect, and so on. But metrics will finally get you the deal or the promotion or the progress that you're seeking, right? So they have different purpose for different audiences. For the founding team, metrics help in maintaining narrow focus and execution, in being coherent, in iterating based on findings and not just gut feeling. And that's why founding team keeps on asking metrics or keeps on asking for specific numbers. For your own team, it helps in defining a crystal clear goal. And for your investors, if at all you are on the board seat or you are the one who presents the product roadmap quite often, then assess whether uh, you know what you're doing, right? Assess whether the team and the company and the product team knows what they are doing. Know more about the business because the right metrics will reveal more things. Qualitatively, you can just guess so much. Reduce the uncertainty and finally evaluate the opportunity, like how big this opportunity really is. So let me define the metrics. What is the definition of metrics? In our context, A business metric is a quantifiable measure that is used to track and assess the status of a specific business process. So, whatever business process you're talking about, or business activity that you're talking about, sales, marketing, or whatsoever, or operations for that matter, a business metric is a quantifiable metric. Okay, it's a measure that helps you identify whether we are going in the right direction and by how much leaps are we progressing. It's important to note that business metrics should be employed to address key audiences surrounding a business, such as investors, customers, and different types of employees. So you'll have to create multiple metrics, uh, which typically, as we'll learn later, would be derived metrics. There'll be a central one or three metrics that you will be aiming at. But to arrive at that, there'll be some few other derived metrics which are relevant for different audiences, and you have to track all of them. Uh, every area of business has specific performance metrics that should be monitored. So marketers track marketing, social media metrics, and so on. Like campaign and program statistics. Sales team monitors sales performance metrics such as new opportunities, leads, and conversions. And executives look at big picture financial metrics. Right? In this topic, I'll take you through the metrics that matter, how to determine which metrics matter, and a couple of good frameworks to consider. So, like for most cases, good metrics are contextual in nature. So, for example, if you say $20 million in sale in quarter four, that sounds pretty awesome. But is it awesome for, let's say, Boeing or Airbus? Not so much, right? So, as per Eric Ries, three A's of metrics. I mean, there are plenty of frameworks out there, but this is one framework which I feel is short, succinct, and puts things clearly in perspective and much more applicable or easy to employ. Three A's of metrics, which you can use to gauge whether your metric is good or bad: actionable, accessible, and auditable. Actionable, so as soon as you hear about that number, that metric, you're able to take action on it. It is accessible, it is easy to access it, it's easy to derive it. It should not take 3 days to just get the number out, right? And finally, auditable. So let's say you hear the number and you sound, oh my god, you believe that this is unreal, or let me just audit this out because this something doesn't sound right. So you should be able to audit it out. So there should be a very clear track, clear direction in which you can move and you can audit the numbers, right? There's a lot of white noise in the space. It is important that you actively seek the signals and identify the metrics which truly represent the value your product or feature is providing. It's very it's very easy to get lost in this entire game of finding the right metrics, right context, and so on. A simple thumb rule that I follow is whether the metric truly represents the core value that your product delivers. Okay, and if you have done the unit one, unit two, unit three properly, then by now you would have a better understanding of what a true value is, right? So context allows business metrics to make an impact. Okay, in fact, this is where the line between key performance index indicators (KPIs), which you have heard uh, quite a lot, and performance metrics, which is the metrics that we're talking about, becomes blurry. Okay, the difference ultimately comes down to this: business metrics are used to track all areas of business. KPIs target critical areas of performance. Okay. For example, a metric may monitor website traffic compared to a goal, whereas a KPI would monitor how website traffic contributed to incremental sales. Right, that is a critical area of performance. Right. So metric is just monitoring website traffic compared to a goal. Okay, we were aiming at getting a million users, million visitors in a month. Uh, Whereas a KPI would monitor how website traffic contributed to incremental sales. So, which is out of this a million users or a million visitors, how many actually contributed to a new sale in this month? That's the incremental sale, right? So, examples of business metrics. Well, there are quite a lot of them, and honestly, this is just this in a set of examples. Don't take them as uh, as a de facto set of metrics that you should be using, but you'll have to apply your brain, you'll have to apply your learnings to find out what metrics matter. And the metrics also change as you grow in your product, the product life cycle, and your company as it grows. The metrics also start changing, right? So depending on your company and the areas you are aiming to monitor, you may want to focus on certain business metrics in particular. Here you can see a number of performance metrics examples from for industry verticals and departments that are available to you. So, for example, these are some of the marketing metrics, right? There are so one is traffic sources, right? Now, in traffic sources, you can see uh, there's a blue line, which is the referral traffic. How the referral traffic is kind of stagnant at 25,000. Then there is a search traffic, which which has a significant dip, almost to 50% somewhere in the September month, and then finally it grows up, while the direct is kind of stabilized at 50,000 visitors, right? So you can see the search one is waxing and waning, and that's where you can actually improve it. You need to make it a little more uh, consistent, right? Had it if it was consistent, then in this month they would not have suffered a dip of almost one third of the entire traffic, right? Similarly, talk walker sentiment. Now, this is another metric that they're using to find out sentiment to do sentiment analysis. If you remember I think I covered this in Unit 2, where I spoke about sentiment analysis in the context of user stories and figuring out whether people like a certain feature in the positive way or in a negative way. Right? Something similar we can do in social media mentions if you're the marketing guy, right? Whether the mentions are all positive or negative or they're neutral. And you can see that there's a lot of neutrality all around, and there's a little bit of green at the top, and slowly the mentions are only declining. Initially, the mentions were quite a lot in April 15th, then by May, the number of mentions have dropped a lot. Incremental sales by campaign. Now, here again, you can see the email is contributing the maximum in incremental sales. That is the new sales in a particular month, right? While AdWords, I mean, it just shows the comparative. It doesn't show compared to the previous month was in the previous month was email doing better or worse, or banner ads was it doing better or worse, right? It just shows comparatively in this month email has performed really well. Banner ads at second, AdWords third, and social ads at the worst, right? For this end action rate, which is the what was the so when the banner ad was displayed, what was the last action that the user took? Did he bounce off? Did he exit? Did he shared something, or did he actually purchase? Purchase turns out to be just 2% of the entire end action rate, right? So as you can see, there are just number of things that you can track, and there's just no end to what all you can track, what all, in what ways you can slice and dice the entire data. The whole problem or the whole idea here is to figure out what matters to you, what are the core business objectives, core business goals, and how do you get the right numbers to represent those goals, right? So marketing metrics are measurable values used by marketing teams to display the overall performance of social platform accounts, campaigns, lead nurturing, etc. Monitoring digital marketing KPIs can help your team stay on target from month to month. With a vast base of different marketing channels used by team, it is crucial for marketing teams to actively track their progress using the right and most effective metrics. Depending on the channels your team is monitoring, metrics and KPIs will vary. Right? Now, you might be wondering why are we reading about marketing metrics? See, I think by now you should stop thinking in that direction, because as a product manager, you need to know about almost everything, how things work and what metrics matter for a marketing guy and so on. Because a lot of times your success, the success of your product will actually depend on this metrics, and this are the metrics that you will also define as a success of or as a success of your product, right? And that's why it's important for you to know what metrics matter for your business stakeholders, right? Because ultimately you're building in collaboration with them, if not for them. right? Another set of marketing metrics is our keyword ranking, right? If in the world of SEO, this is a very very crucial uh, metric, right? So for the keyword great bikers, uh, rank one. I mean, we're going down a little bit. The local bike repairs, we've gone down by three ranks, for example, and we need to go up. Correct. And similar to search performance, 30 days. Over 30 days, what is the search performance? And you can see that the GCR uh, is slowly increasing. uh, the organic and the paid is not performing so well, or I should say it's kind of consistent through and through. But GCR is increasing incrementally over the entire month. Similarly, sales metrics, right? Now in sales metric, there's a sales growth Y2D, which is year till date. Top products in revenue is another metric, very interesting metric to consider. So this will help you in figuring out uh, whether your filters or whether your search is displaying this top products properly or not, right? Average purchase value. So if it is increasing, average purchase value is increasing, that basically means your checkout or your entire search or your upselling tactics are actually working, right? And finally, sales performance, which is profit margin, depending on what kind of company you're running or company you're working for. If the goal is profit margin, then you're doing okay job because it increased and it dipped and then it increased and then it dipped. So it's going a little funky. Revenue definitely increased, although profit margins decreased. So maybe there was uh, a lot of spending on the operation side of things, or maybe on the marketing side of things. Something went a little wonky, but yeah. Overall, see you can see the profit margins definitely dipped. The profit increased in general, right? So these are the things that you will try to track. Similarly, financial metrics, which is something which your management, your board would be very, very interested in. Okay, and that's why you need to have a just a basic understanding of what is short-term assets, debt to equity, if needed. Depending on what kind of company, where you exist, right? These are some of the SaaS metrics which matter. SaaS companies need to pay a close attention to metrics that display their ability to retain customers. Because in SaaS companies or SaaS products, retention is the key. Like, retention is the key everywhere, but then for SaaS, more so. Like it can mean having food on the table today and not having food on the table tomorrow. Right? The ability to retain customers, generate recurring revenue, and to attract customers. Right? These are some of the top metrics for SaaS companies. So MRR retention, MRR expansion, monthly MRR retention, right? This is monthly recurring rate or monthly recurring revenue, uh, right? So actual target is 99%, 99.28% is what is running on. They're killing it, right? Expansion is not going so well. The target was 3.5 NEP. What it means is uh, how do you increase the recurring revenue? How are you expanding? That is how you're getting new customers in, right? So how much did it expand this month, right? And how is the retention going? 99% one versus plan, and you can see that there's a significant dip in 2 months. Then the customer lifetime value, it's 34 months and about $7,500 for the entire lifetime value. This is another metric that that SaaS companies track a lot. Cancellations this month, this will matter in certain cases. So, uh, so this is some of the most important metrics that a lot of SaaS companies track. But as you can imagine, you cannot optimize for every single thing. What you will typically end up doing is you will try to identify for this quarter which of these metrics is a top priority. Do we need to look at uh, expanding, that is market share? Then most likely you're looking for MRR expansion of sorts, right? Because that matters the most. Are you able to expand your entire audience base or not, right? Um Similarly, if you're talking about retention as the key thing, because you're consistently seeing that there's a lot of input, but a lot of people don't stay. Then you're simply looking at cancellations this month, and we need to make sure that the cancellations are within a certain threshold. Right? Then social media metrics. So media metrics are used uh, by marketing teams largely to track the performance of social media campaigns. Social media marketing is a fundamental part of any business, right? Bringing in website visits and eventually converting website users into lead. Since marketing teams often use multiple social media platforms to increase impressions, it can be difficult to monitor performances on all of them. So these social media metrics combine the most important data and allow your team to track their progress. So, for instance, you're looking at, for example, just look at this number: key social metrics, May 2016. So 5,600 referrals, 410 conversions, 1,175 events. This is across abstracted across all the channels, right? Now, if you want to go deeper, so this is the number that you will typically show to your business stakeholders or your CEO or the board or something. This is the number you will typically show, right? But within your team, you will typically talk about this. Facebook followers was a target. So target was 5,000, but we just got about 2,000 current followers, which is pretty bad. Similar Twitter followers was a target. We were targeting 25,000 Twitter followers, and we are only at 15,000 followers. Similar Twitter stats, 4,400 followers. It's just a static representation. It doesn't show. So this little signs kind of give a little additional information that okay, we have improved. Okay, we have improved from the previous from the trading performance. This one shows that we have not done anything, and in this case, I'm not sure what it shows. So yeah, these symbols need to be more, uh, I should say, descriptive by themselves. Similarly, there are some more metrics that you can talk about. For example, call monitor, for example, active calls, on hold, abandoned, which could be something that your customer support team might be concerned about. Or if you have built a product for your customer support team, you would like to see how it is performing and whether this abandoned calls have they declined to almost zero, and is the whole time within a certain threshold. For example, you can see that the whole time has increased to 25 callers for a certain month, which is incredibly poor. Right, it should be way lower. Right? What is service level today? Right, I hope you guys remember what Ajay had shown long back in the second or third unit, uh, where he showed how Nolarity is using some of the metrics and what metrics do they track. Something similar is what I'm trying to display here. Similarly, patient metrics, so arrival to bed, arrival to physician, how much time does it take, arrival to nurse, arrival to discharge, right? So how much time does it take for a patient to arrive and to finally get a bed? It's about a 20, target 20 minutes, right now it's 25 minutes, right, which is poor. So using this, you can actually start slowly improve, and this is the number which you can see somebody like the CEO of Medanta would be concerned about, for example, right? What's the project burn down looking like? This is another metric that you will consider as a product manager itself, right? So, what were the story points which were initially planned, and how are they actually going, right? So, actual internal versus actual external versus all stories projection. So, all story projection was this thin line, while actual external was the sprint one to sprint two. So, which brings me to the next question: how to pick good metrics? I spoke about so many different kind of metrics, right? Well, true. So there are just so many metrics and so little time. So it's extremely easy to go overboard with the number of metrics that you track because you start believing that okay, this also matters, that also matters. This I can track this, I can get this, I can get that, and so on, right? Because each metric feels important. But don't worry, that's a problem everyone faces. Picking good metrics and by good metrics I mean the metrics that can give you real meaningful insight. You will need good practice beyond thumb rules. You will need a lot of good practice to be able to spot the signal from the noise. And it's not something that can be just taught. As you, I can definitely give you some framework, but beyond that, it's a good practice. I mean, you have to consistently practice and keep refining over every sprint. So, for example, you have been tasked to improve search experience on the app. There are many things to look at, right? So we want to improve search experience. So what does that mean, right? Search. Sorry. What does that mean, right? Search results are not displayed correctly. Results are not relevant. Query suggestion is not working. Real-time results is expected, right? So when you say improve search experience, what exactly are you trying to say? What is the problem here? So your first deep dive would be to identify critically what is the problem. I can understand that all of this might be happening. All of this might be the cause because of which you're saying, yeah, we need to completely overhaul search experience, right? But even then, you will have to consider um, what matters the most. Are we talking about, let's say, flight search, in which case real-time results matter the most? Because if you don't provide real-time results, it can cost the business as well as the business a lot of money, because you might be showing poor, like old rates, while the rates have already increased, and you will end up losing money. Or you can end up uh, you can end up creating a lot of problem for the customer. The customer experience will be pretty bad, because the rate that he was expecting on the search result page, when he actually uh, goes to the checkout page, the rate has increased, which I'm sure you would have experienced in the flight booking scenarios. A lot of time that happens. Uh, so these are just some of the questions that you can ask, and you can push back from whosoever is asking you, or if you have come up with this problem yourself, uh, then you need to ask yourself, what exactly do I need to work on? Okay, so just to focus on improve search experience, right? You need to start with the end. Always remember that. Okay, all pragmatic product leaders, they always start with the end. They'll start focusing on what's the end goal, what's the end result that I'm expecting, and outcome that I'm expecting the users to go through. And then you will start coming up with the metrics that can truly represent that outcome. Okay. So in this case, for example, once I've understood what does that mean, which is search results are not displayed correctly or not relevant, or query suggestions are not working, or real-time results are not working. Uh, let's say I identify that search results are not displayed correctly. Okay, so they are not in chronological order, or they're reverse chronological, or they're in some order which is very poorly understood, right? So I need to uh, so maybe I need to create a metric. So if they are not displayed correctly, what will the behavior be of the users? The users will end up consuming a lot more time to actually click on any of the links, because they're just trying to grasp what is this result talking about, what is this result exactly, right? So the search to click time would be pretty high, right? It would be pretty high. And it can also mean that there will be a significant bounce, because a lot of people will not even click on anything. But now between these two metrics of uh, between these two metrics of between these two metrics of people bouncing off and people taking a lot of time to click on any link, there is a significant difference. And depending on what you are trying to answer, you might have to pick one of these two. For instance, if people are taking a lot of time, but they're eventually clicking on a link, that basically means the results are relevant. They're just not displayed correctly. Okay, people are taking a lot of time to understand the results, and that's why they're taking a lot of time to click. Okay, but if people are simply bouncing off, that basically means the search results are not relevant. Okay, or the results are just poor, right? So you can understand just a small tweak, and you are answering completely different questions. Correct. So moving along. So always start from the end. What exactly are you trying to aim, and how do you find the right number to represent that scenario? How do you do that? You identify the goal and hypothesis, right? So sit with the business team to identify what's the core goal. What are they trying to optimize? What are they trying to do? Establish a baseline. So find out industry benchmarks. If you do not have enough data, uh, if you do not have enough data with you right now, so you will use either the existing industry benchmarks, or you will use the data that you already have. uh, create a baseline that you can compare against. Then you triangulate all the factors. So list down all the possible factors impacting the business goal. Okay, and then you finally experiment and iterate. I think this sequence you should be now very familiar with, because you will see that almost all the experiments, almost all the discussion of hypothesis testing or this and that, all of them cover exactly the same flow. And same goes for metrics also, right? So when you design and run an experiment, that's when you start identifying which metrics start to matter, which data starts to matter, right? So for instance, it's in a for Facebook, it's very popular that they determined after a lot of experiments that an X number of friends, if every uh, new joinee gets to make about X number of friends, that was seven friends in, sorry, 13 friends or seven friends, I'm not able to recall, but X number of friends within Y number of days, they showed a heightened sense of stickiness. Okay, they stayed over. Okay, and that became a formula for almost all other social networks to come up with that right number, right? So in our case, let me illustrate the entire metric, searching for the metric using one of the examples. So users are not clicking on products. Let's say you're doing an e-commerce company, you're a product manager for e-commerce company, and the problem is users are not clicking on products, which essentially identified by a heightened either bounce rate or people are searching for a certain product, but they are not eventually clicking, right? So we need to create the hypothesis to begin with. So users not clicking on products can be because pictures are not exciting, the prices are too high, too many products on the page, search results are not relevant to query, filters are not well defined, they don't have the right filter categories. For example, filters are too few, filters are not working well. For example, a lot of people complain between Flipkart and Amazon. Flipkart has an amazing set of filters, but Amazon doesn't have to create a filter, right? So I can go on, but you get the drift. You lay out the possible suspects and have to quickly triangulate around what can be the main culprits. Let's say the industry average is 20% conversion from search result page to product details page. Okay, you are doing 10%, right? So people search something and then they'll click on a certain product page, product details, product link, and they land up on the product details page. The industry average is 20% for your industry. Okay, but you are doing 10%, which is significant gap, right? And you are looking at major issues because that gap is not should be bridged as soon as possible, right? So let's try to reason out. Okay, so if pictures were so bad, you will notice, right? If they're already good but may not be clicked from the right angle or are not descriptive enough, it is safe to assume that the impact from this enhancement will not create huge difference, right? It may be the case, right? It obviously depends on industry to industry and company to company. For example, if you're selling used cars, it's a different case because people would like to see a lot of pictures and pictures from a lot of angles uh, before they can take a call. Right. The second is prices are too high, and this is a possible case. And in that scenario, maybe industry average doesn't apply to you, since you sell a high value item. You only deal in luxury products. So one way to check if this is your culprit is by looking at the graph of clicks versus price, right? So if price was a major contributor in clicks, then this is one of your culprits, right? The magnitude of impact should be evaluated after this. Also, you can run a few experiments to validate this hypothesis. Give discount on few selected products, ones who have not been performing despite appearing search results regularly, right? So if a certain set of products are showing up in the search results very frequently, but they are not getting bought, what could be the problem, right? So now if suddenly they shoot up, that is after giving discount, then your audience is price sensitive and it is willing to buy an otherwise perceived inferior product. Correct? Did you see what I did there? I defined the constraints of the experiment very specifically. Not any product, but only those products which have not been performing well. Okay, but that's not all. These products should be appearing in search results frequently, right? So they should not be performing well despite appearing in search results frequently, right? So after all, we are working to improve search experience, right? So too many products on the page, the third problem. This should not drop the conversion by 10%. This will typically cause people to drop out after clicking on few products, right? People get confused and people get. So when you see a lot of products, you'll typically be initially excited that, okay, there's so many options to choose and let me just find out, right? Um, and sometimes, and after some time, you actually realize that, okay, this is causing me a lot of confusion. Let me come back to this later, right? So people will drop out. That's the behavior that people will typically demonstrate, right? Uh, Search results are not relevant to query. Well, this is a biggie and has the potential to create huge drops, right? How do you check if this can be a potential culprit? So imagine a user experience where the search results are not relevant. In a typical session, he will perform a search, scroll a bit, and then click a product if it's relevant enough. Then, because product didn't satisfy him or he wants more options, he does another research with a tweaked query and does the same actions. So, if you look at the queries per session and plot against number of products clicked, you'll be able to see high number of queries against very few clicks. That's a goal, and you have hit the jackpot, right? So similar analysis can be done for other options too. But what I want to draw your attention to is how carefully we selected the metrics that matter and figured out a method to draw insight, right? So higher the ratio of queries per session and number of clicks, poorer the search results are, right? So one can argue that user may not be clicking because he didn't like the products and that we were showing no issue with our search results. Valid point. In which case, you will similarly define a new metric and assess this to derive your insight, right? So the whole idea here is uh, all of the discourse that I'm just talking about, that I'm discussing right now. The discourse is all about your mileage would vary. Your particular company, your particular product, your particular industry, uh, they might vary from what I just described. But the important thing is, how do you come up with a hypothesis? And how do you then convert that into a metric that is trackable and that is measurable? Right? So let's jump on. So what are the kinds of metrics that you may come across? And I'm just putting it across here, little academic, but putting it across here. So you might be looking at efficiency indicators. So depending on if you remember the product life cycle uh, graph, right? So as you grow and as you mature and stabilize, you'll typically start focusing more and more on the efficiency indicators, right? The effectiveness indicators would be, I mean, all of these metrics are applicable across the board, across the entire life cycle, but some of them are way more useful in certain phases. For example, effectiveness indicator is great at the initial and the growth days because you want to be hyper effective, right? You want to get the maximum out of the limited resources that you have, right? Capacity indicators, productivity indicators, quality indicators, and so on, right? So once you know the problem area, whether it is a capacity problem or efficiency problem, you can then zero down on the relevant indicators. Okay. So let me talk about, with this as a background. Let's talk about two frameworks which are industry standard almost. Like everybody uses this in startups. Uh, so there is the framework called HEART, which was proposed by Google uh, via their Google Sprint book and their entire framework around conducting super rapid um design sprints. So HEART stands for, it's an abbreviation for H. H stands for happiness, which is customer happiness. So how happy is the user with the product, and users perceive the product as easy to use and are likely to recommend. Okay, it's a quantitative metric and can be measured via NPS or simple surveys, right? So it looks at satisfaction, likelihood, or of recommendation. E stands for engagement. So how engaged are the users? How frequently do they use your product? So you rely on data analytics suite like Google Analytics to discover this. For example, visits per session, search per session, and so on. Right. So how much an average user is using your product by time, sessions, etc. Depending on what your product does. A stands for adoption, the percent of users who adopt your product after signing up. So that is after user onboarding. And then use the product or a feature, which is feature adoption. Okay. So you measure this also via analytics. So you are essentially looking at how many sign up and then how many adopt a certain feature, how many start actually using filters for Instagram, for example, right? R stands for retention. So how many users are still present later? So retention is typically defined in a certain time frame again. So retention within 1 hour would be pretty high, but retention within 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months uh, would be very very different, right? And that's why retention is always, whenever you mention retention, you always speak in a certain time unit in certain time frame. So you say D30 retention, for example. So retention of the 30th day of this particular cohort, right? And finally, task success. So typically, all the people who are coming to your product, whether it's Facebook or whether it's Amazon, they're coming to complete a certain task. Remember the jobs to be done framework, right? Uh, so that is kind of getting represented in this task success uh, uh, parameter, right? So how successful was the user in doing the task he used the product for? How long did it take, and what was the error rate, right? So if it's taking a lot of time, or if it is not happening in the right manner and he has to do it all over again and again because the product is not reliable, obviously the user will eventually drop out. He will say that he will have a certain perception that the product is unreliable, so I will rather not use it right now till I find a alternative. Okay. And you measure this via again user surveys and user tests. Now, what I've done is I have compared user. So there's another framework called GSM, which is goals, signals, and metrics, and I put this across each other, and this has helped me in this has helped me in getting a much better clarity on the metrics that we are talking about and the metrics that we produce for the product. Okay. So, for example, this is an example for a certain product, certain app. So happiness goal is customer is satisfied with checkout process on app and all orders get delivered. That is the goal that we are trying to aim at. So what are the signals? If this is happening, then the signal would be App Store rating and Google Play Store rating, right? And the metric would be the rating should improve every month. Okay. Engagement. So increase the number of orders and total value of each orders. If the user is engaged in our e-commerce product, e-commerce app, then the number of orders and the total value of each order, the basket size will start increasing. That is the goal, right? With in terms of engagement. So signals would be number of orders per customer, average basket value per customer, right? And metric would be average order per customer per month. See the time frame that has been added. And average basket value per customer per month. Correct? This per month could be per year, per 3 months. It could be anything. But yeah, you get the drift. A stands for adoption, and the adoption goal is users should open the app to purchase a product as soon as they install the app, right? So as soon as they install the app, we would want the adoption to be immediate, okay? Not after 1 day, not after 5 days. So number of app download and number of app open. If we create a graph between these two, we should be able to get an understanding uh, of how our adoption is going. So ratio between customer who download the app and those who are making an order have to increase per month, right? Uh, then retention, customer should make a new order every month, right? The number of customers who are making an order, that becomes a signal, and finally the metric ratio of customers this month and last month. Very simply, that is the retention, right? Finally, task success. So reduce the abandoned cart and finish an order within 5 minutes. That's our task success goal, right? And signal would be incomplete orders. How many incomplete orders are we getting? on a frequent basis, and time of making an order. So how much time does it take for a typical user to start the session and end the session, right? This is number of abandoned cart. I should have added per month here. And average time to check out. Right. This is another example which I picked from. Sorry. This is another example which I picked from the internet, right? And this is a very good uh, job done by someone. I don't know who, but so happiness is user attitudes. You can determine it by surveys, satisfaction, perceived ease of use, net promoter score. You can use any of them to figure out the happiness of the users. The goal is high level, and you get to identify the goals. Signals is success or failure in goals, right? Map to user behavior or attitudes, right? And metrics is refine further, track over time, use for comparison, right? It's a very uh, good sheet. I don't remember where I found it. Um, so happiness and goals, users find toolkit useful uh, and uh, and satisfy successfully their search inquiry. I mean, the English is not so great, but you get the drift. I think I'll leave you guys with this. It's a very good cheat sheet for you to remember, right? Then this is another example that I found, which is about hard framework for a two-step verification feature. Right? Uh, so happiness and so what are the happiness goals? That our clients feel even more satisfied and secure using our products, right? So if you're doing two-step verification, well, every time you do that, you feel that yeah, you are in a secure environment, right? What is a signal? Positive feedback when we ask our users about the feature in the form of a survey. That's a signal. And metric would be the percentage of our client base that feels more satisfied and secure after enabling the feature. So let's say after doing all this mehnat, all this effort of 2 months or of 6 months, you eventually release this and you realize that only 5% or 10% of your users are feeling more satisfied, or they are considering this as a major overhaul, right? Uh, the effort is not so well justified in that case, right? The engagement in this case, as per the author, is not applicable. Okay, adoption to have the majority of a user base enable the two-step verification feature. Now, majority is a funny thing. Majority is 50.1% also, and majority is 99.9% also. I believe we should. I mean, there should be a number that should be put. Signal is when a client enables functionality in the security settings page. If that happens, that's the signal that okay, it is getting adopted. The number of clients who enable the functionality versus the total number of client accounts, right? The ratio of people who have adopted the feature versus people who have not adopted it. That's the metric. Retention. The users who enable the feature continue to use it throughout the whole duration of their contract. Okay. User churn is shown when a client disables a feature in the security settings page. So whenever client disable the feature, after that, people typically churn out. That's a signal, right? So the duration of feature use being measured from the day a user enables it to the day they disable it in relation to their total contract length. That's a very interesting metric, right? And finally, task success, that all users who enable the feature manage successfully after the first try. There are three steps to enabling the feature. So whenever they attempt at enabling the feature, they should not be fumbling. They should not get lost in the entire steps because these kind of verifications can get a little tricky at times. Signal would be the event logs per user show that all three steps were completed successfully in the first go itself. That's a signal. The signal that the task success is going well. And metric would be the number of users that completed all three steps successfully in the first go. It should be a ratio actually. This is a bad metric. Honestly, this is a very bad metric. The number of users that completed all three steps successfully in the first go. Let's say it was 100. So what? 100 out of a million users, 100 out of 1,000 users, 100 out of 200 users, right? It can change the entire picture, right? So good metrics are typically all actionable, right? Actionable, accessible, and auditable. So this number is not actionable, for example. This, in contrast, number of clients who enable the functionality versus the total number of client accounts, which typically will be represented in a ratio, is much more actionable because you can say that okay, we are getting 80, we have 80% adoption, we have 80% adoption, right? as against saying that we have 80 people are using this feature right now. 80 out of how many? Right? 80 out of 89 or 80 out of 8,000? That can change the entire discussion, right? The second metric which I want to talk about is popularized and proposed by Dave McClure of 500 Startups. It's also known as Pirate Metrics, and it's a very very broad framework, and that's why I guess it gained so much of popularity. I've also added a very good link in the speaker notes. Please check it out. And this has been documented very very heavily, so I'm not going to go very very deep into it, but I'll give you some ideas. Right? So Pirate Metrics stands for AARRR. A stands for acquire. So how are you getting the users? That's the question that you need to answer. Activation or activate. Are the users getting a great onboarding experience? Are they using a feature of the product? Right. Retain. So are they coming back and how frequently are they coming back? Revenue, how are you monetizing? And finally, refer. Is your product so good that your users are talking about? So if you consider these five buckets of metrics that you need to bother about, so understand that this is just a framework, right? So you need to think of acquire or acquisition as a bucket, and you need to figure out the metrics which signal acquisition, right? Similarly, you need to figure out the metrics that signal activation, and so on, right? So as displayed in this graph, in this figure, so how do users become aware of you? That's the question that you're trying to answer in acquisition. The SEO, SEM, widgets, word of mouth, email, PR, campaigns. What exactly is happening here? Activation. Do drive-by visitors subscribe? So people who land up because they saw some email or something. What do? They land up and they talk about it. They sign up. They sign up for the newsletter. They click on few buttons. What do they do? Right? uh, does a one-time user become engaged? So after signing up this on this newsletter, what do they do? Right? Do Are they retained or not? Right? Are they coming back again and again or not? Finally, do you make money from user activity? It could be pure money, or it could be the attention that is people clicking on, activating, or engaging in the content that is displayed on your app. Right? Do users promote your product? So they love your product so much that they are talking about, for example, for Instagram, the currency would be, the referral would be, are they inviting their friends or not? Are they putting their Instagram handle on their blogs, on their personal, in are they attaching Instagram handle in their personal artifacts or not? Right. So to go a slightly deeper, so AARRR, that is R. Let me just talk to you about what are the function and relevant metrics that you can track, just to give you a little bit of idea. So acquisition, let us said, the function is to generate attention through a variety of means, both organic and inorganic. Okay. The relevant metrics would be traffic, mentions, social media mentions, cost per click if you're doing ads, search results, SEO, cost of acquisition, open rate. You would typically track all these metrics to figure out whether acquisition is working as nicely as you planned it to be. Activation is turn the resulting drive-by visitors into users who are somehow enrolled, right? So enrollments, sign-ups, completed onboarding process, use the service at least once, subscriptions, this all become important metrics. Retention convince users to come back repeatedly, exhibiting sticky behavior. So engagement, time since last visit, daily and monthly active users, churns, so on. Revenue, business outcomes, right, which vary by your business model. Purchases, ad clicks, content creation, subscription. So it could be anything, right? So if you are a blog platform, for example, you're not charging people, but what matters for you is how many people eventually created a new content. For example, for Medium, how many people actually became a user and became a content creator. That becomes an important revenue channel for you. The customer lifetime value, conversion rate, shopping cart size, click through revenue, all of these metrics become important for you. And finally, referrals. So viral and word of mouth invitations to other potential users. And the invite sends viral coefficient, viral cycle time, and so many other metrics which can help you track how well is your product referring. So let me give you an example of using R in a certain startup, right? So generally speaking, our framework and offers you five means of measuring the customer life cycle. So, a simple example. So, a website is getting 1,000 visitors per month. Okay. Only 20% of 700 users will return after first visit, right? So, activation was about 70%. Uh, I'm sorry. So, activation was about 70%, so that they are getting nearly 700 users per month. Only 20% of 700 users will return after first visit, which is retention, right? From 20%, which is now 140 users, only 10% are paying, right? So only 14% users, only 14 users are paying each month. Nearly 10% of all visitors will tell their friends about that website, which is the referral, right? It means this site has a good activation rate of 70%, right? Which means they are exploring a real problem and have a working solution. Also, they have a convincing landing page, right? That's why people are signing up. In order to increase signups, they search ways to improve acquisition, that is, new visitors by adding more acquisition channels or try to attract more users working on SEO. Their retention is only 20%. So they develop some new features like email newsletters, white papers, gamification to return users. Then they understand that users are not coming back because the service doesn't solve users' problem or customers don't know how to use it. Site owners make easy to understand guides to help users. Okay. The process of converting users into paying customers, which is revenue, in order to increase it, the customer adapts its pricing policy, improves the client communication process, and takes other steps to convince users to buy, thus becoming customers. Finally, they check why their service is not being recommended, which is the referral. To increase the number of referrals, the goal is to make customers like the product enough to recommend it to others, right? So by sharing, commenting, verbal recommendation, etc. So you'll come up with either like what GoIbigo did, which was getting 50 rupees for syncing a contact list, was a smart, clever way. It's not exactly referral to be precise, but it's close enough. The true referral would be Uber or Dropbox, right, where they provided Uber credits or Dropbox 2 GB accounts for each successful referral, right? Uh, so beyond R and heart, which are way more, I'll say, actionable frameworks, there are a couple of others which I just want to touch upon. So in Lean Startup, uh, Eric Ries talks about three engines that drive the growth of a startup. Each of these has associated key performance indicators. So one is sticky engine. The sticky engine focuses on getting users to return and to keep using your product. It's akin to Dave McClure's retention phase. If your users aren't sticky, churn will be very high and you won't have engagement. Engagement is one of the best predictors of success. Facebook's early user counts weren't high, but the company could get nearly all students in a university to use the product and to keep coming back within a few months of launch. Facebook's stickiness was off the charts. The fundamental KPI for stickiness is customer retention. Churn rates and usage frequency are other important metrics to track, right? So churn rate, usage frequency, just remember this metrics. Uh, Long-term stickiness often comes from the value users create for themselves as they use the service. It's hard for people to leave Gmail or Evernote because, well, that's where they store all their stuff. Similarly, if a player deletes his account for a massively multiplayer online game, MMORPG, he loses all his status and in-game items, which he has worked hard to earn. Stickiness isn't only about retention; it's also about frequency, which is why you also need to track metrics like time since last visit. If you have methods of driving return visits such as email notifications or updates, then email open rates and click-through rates matter too, right? So essentially, sticky engine is nothing but what Dave McClure mentions about in retention phase, right? So if you're covering, like if you just follow his framework, Dave McClure's, I think you're good to go. Uh, then comes virality engine. So virality is all about getting the word out. Virality is attractive because it compounds. If every user adds another 1.5 users, Your user base will grow infinitely until you have saturated all users. Minutes. The reality is a little different, but yeah, the sense is that it will grow exponentially. Okay, till you hit some other hurdle. The key metric for this engine is the viral coefficient, the number of new users that each user brings on. Because this is compounding, the users they bring in turn bring their own users. The metric measures how many users are brought in with each viral cycle. Growth comes from a viral coefficient of greater than 1. But you also have to factor in churn and loss. The bigger the coefficient, the faster you grow. Measuring viral coefficient isn't enough. You also need to measure the actions that make up the cycle. For example, when you join most social networks, you're asked to connect to your email account to find contacts. Then you're given the option to invite them. They receive emails which they might act upon. Those distinct stages all contribute to virality. So measuring actions is how you tweak the viral engine by changing the message, simplifying the sign up process, and so on. There are other factors at play with virality as well, including the speed with which a user invites another, so known as the viral cycle time. So how long does it take for the entire viral cycle to complete? Does it take one day? Does it take 1 year or 2 years? Because in that case, it's a good chance you will lose out of or you will run out of your money before a viral cycle actually completes. Right? The time of virality. We'll dive into this later uh, in the tutorial. So, and the third is paid engine. The third engine of growth is payment. It's usually a premature decision to turn this engine on before you know that your product is sticky and viral, right? So there was a game called Meteor Entertainment's Hawken. It's a multiplayer game that's free to play, but it makes money from in-game upgrades. Meteor is focusing on usage within a beta group first, which is stickiness. Then working on virality, inviting your friends to play, and finally payment. Players buying upgrades to becoming competitive or enhance the in-game experience. Getting paid is in some ways the ultimate metric for identifying a sustainable business model. If you make more money from customers than it costs you to acquire them and you do it consistently, you're sustainable. You don't need money from external investors and you're growing shareholder value and equity every day. But getting paid on its own isn't an engine of growth. It's just a way to put money in the bank. So revenue helps growth only when you funnel some of the money generated from revenue back into acquisition. Okay. Let me repeat this once again. Revenue helps growth only when you funnel some of the money generated from revenue back into acquisition, right? So then you have a machine that you can tune to grow the business over time. So the two knobs on this machine are customer lifetime value and customer acquisition cost, right? So just getting paid is not enough. You need to actually identify the CAC, which is customer acquisition cost, and the CLV, which is customer lifetime value, or LTV, or just the lifetime value, right? If you're making more money than what the customer is, you that than what you are paying to acquire the customer, you're good, and you are able to put some of that revenue back into acquiring new users, right? So making more money from customers than you spend acquiring them is good, but the equation for success isn't that simple. You still need to worry about cash flow and growth rate, which are driven by how long it takes a customer to pay off. So one way to measure this is time to customer break even. That is how much time it will take to recoup the acquisition cost of a customer. Let's say you spend $20 acquiring a customer, right? Uh, and the customer is only paying you $1 a month, maybe. So basically, he's going to take 20 months to just give you the money, right? To just recoup the acquisition money itself, right? Nothing else, not the operations, nothing else. So you can imagine combining the operations cost and providing the data and whatnot. It's going to cost you much more than 20 months to actually recoup the to break even on the customer. What if the customer lifetime value or the lifetime period is just 6 months? There is no way you can make money on this customer, right? And that is what Eric Rice tries to say. So just to repeat, sticky engine is similar to retention in the Dave McClaw's Pirate Metrics. Virality engine is similar to the referral phase, and paid engine is rather the revenue phase. So Eric Rice doesn't talk too much about um, the acquisition. or activation. Moving on. So, so within the lean canvas, I mean, you guys have gone through the lean canvas when we were trying to identify your product, when we were trying to identify what you wanted to build for your product work. So here I'm covering the nine phases, the nine segments that matter uh, when it comes to metrics, right? How do you identify how well are you doing uh, using a lean canvas? So unlike a traditional business plan, you should use and update the lean canvas continuously. It's a living, breathing plan, not a hypothetical tome of nonsense that you throw out the minute you start actually working on your startup. So once you have filled out the lean canvas, or most of it, you don't have to fill up the entire thing. You can just fill up one or two fields and you can start working with it. You start running experiments to validate or invalidate what you have hypothesized. In its simplest form, think of each box as a pass fail. If your experiment fails, you don't go to the next box. Rather, you keep experimenting until you hit a wall completely or get to the next step. The only exception is the key metrics box, right? Which is meant to keep a record of the most important metrics you're tracking. You don't run experiments on this box, but it's important to fill it out anyway because it's definitely open to debate and discussion. Right? Uh, so, problem respondents who have this need, respondents who are aware of having this need. So, if you can create a ratio between these two uh, by a user survey, uh, you can actually identify whether the problem is large enough or as large as you're imagining it to be or not. Right? So the metric to determine the pass or fail of the solution is respondents who try the MVP, engagement, churn, most used, least used features, people willing to pay, and so on and so forth to figure out whether the solution is actually working or not. Using unique value proposition, which is UVP, feedback scores, independent ratings, sentiment analysis, customer worded descriptions, so how the customer is treating the final solution, the final value proposition, survey, search, and comparative analysis. All of this help you determine whether your unique value proposition is a pass or fail, right? Similar to custom segments, how easy it is to find group of prospects, unique keyword segments, targeted funnel traffic from a particular source, right? All of this help you in determining whether you are doing the right, whether you're taking the right approach in determining the customer segments or not. Then channels, leads and customers per channel, uh, the viral coefficient and cycle per channel, NPS per channel, open rate, affiliate margins, click through rate, so many other things. Right? Unfair advantage. So respondents' understanding of UPP, patents, brand equity, blah blah blah. All of this help you in creating some sort of a quantitative measure of your unfair advantage. Finally, the last two things, revenue streams, which is the LTV, obviously. Average revenue per customer, which is ARPU. You would have heard of this term, ARPU, average revenue per user. Uh, Conversion rate, shopping cart size, click through rate, and so many other things. Finally, the cost structure, which is fixed cost, cost of customer acquisition, cost of servicing the nth customer. So, as the number of customers increase, the marginal cost of servicing the nth customer also decreases, right? The support costs. So that is the cost structure, and these are all the metrics that you can bother about when you are actually just starting up with your product journey, right? When you have just drafted your first lean canvas and you want to figure out which metrics matter for each of these sections, and you can use this. Lastly, there's another framework called growth pyramid, uh, which was proposed by Sean Ellis uh, as a product market fit survey, and he said that end of the day, uh, the best quantitative way to figure out whether a product has hit a product market fit is by doing this one question survey, and that is, how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? Okay, very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed, and not applicable. I no longer use this product. So if 40% plus are very disappointed, you have product market fit. So this is, I believe, the only quantitative measure that I have come across. Otherwise, it's usually very qualitative description of product market fit, right? And in a startup, your typically be all your metrics would typically be around uh, figuring out how to grow, right? And as per Sean Ellis, who's a veteran in growing very very large companies, I'm talking about Airbnb and Facebook and Uber. Uh, so product market fit is where you start the game, is the foundation, right? Decide what you sell to whom and then prove it. Then you stack the odds, just find a defensible, unfair advantage and tweak it. Okay. And finally, you scale the growth. Step on the gas in new markets, products, and channels. That's how you grow, and you'll figure out the right metrics for each one of them. I just thought this needs to be mentioned, right? So many frameworks, and what do you do? Okay, very simple. Follow common sense, as you would have discovered in the examples I was giving. If you go the logical path of goals, signal, and metric, if you keep doing that, and you keep the three um, uh, the, the three A's of metrics, which is actionable, accessible, and auditable, uh, the chances of you failing or you producing a poor metric is going to be very, very low. Follow common sense. Don't go overboard. Keep it very simple. Get a hang of it. That add another metric if needed. So you just start with one single metric and then you go about adding more metrics as you get more and more comfortable, right? So it's almost like learning how to drive, right? You start with very slow speeds. When you get comfortable driving in straight line, get comfortable turning, and then you slowly start increasing the gas, speeding up, taking riskier turns, overtaking, and so on. Follow a single framework at a time. Don't mix it up. Okay, don't start using Eric Ries and R and Hart, all of them put together. It'll only confuse you. In the beginning, once you become a veteran, yes, it'll become very easy for you. But in the beginning, just use one. So use Hart across GSM and you're sorted, or just use R and you're sorted. You don't have to use everything. And lastly, everything is mutating. Don't forget that. So your metrics dashboard should be updated frequently. Okay. Till you find no reason to update. In my opinion, frequency should be at least three times your experiment length. So if your experiment is about 2 weeks long or a month long, you should update, like you will at least run it unless the experiment is complete failure. You would at least run once or twice the entire experiment to actually, or across multiple customer segments to gain confidence in your uh, output. So whenever you gain certain uh, insight, then you update the metric if the metric is not reflective what you learned. I have in the speaker notes I have added some more uh, reading material. Please go through them. I've also added the original PDF, original slide of Demiclot. Uh, that will be very useful. And plus, I've also covered, also added Eric Lee's The Lean Startup Tech Talk, where he covers his engines. That's it, guys. It's a very simple. Uh, it's a very very simple unit, uh, but it's a unit which will require a lot of practice for you to get confident. Unless and until you actually do it for many many users, for many many apps. So, for example, you pick up Instagram and try to figure out what will the core metrics be for this particular product, or pick up Uber, or pick up Zomato, or pick up any of the products that you like, and try to identify what metrics would matter for this particular product in acquisition, in activation, in referral, in revenue, in retention, and that will slowly improve in you'll slowly improve in identifying the metrics much faster. Okay, so that's it for now, guys. See you till next time.